Dr. X, welcome to Docs Outside the Box. We're going to talk about something that we never talked about before. We always talk about, making sure that from a personal finance standpoint that we are in harmony with our significant others. Obviously, when we think about divorce, we think about, all of the emotional issues that can occur, but also some of the personal finance issues that could occur also. So, one of the things that me and Renee always try to do is we tell people that this is work, yo. Like, this ain't like after like a year or so, like the bliss and all those things that people talk about, like that stuff falls by the wayside. And after that is work. Like you got to bring a lunch pail to work and be ready to, make this happen. But sometimes, there are times when you got to part ways, and you, Dr. X, are here to talk about how you were able to do that in a very efficient, amicable, as well as, frugal way. And you're going to be talking about how you were able to go through the pandemic, get a divorce, and only spend $1,000, which is crazy cheap, frugal. I don't know how you did it, because I'm looking up on websites. It looks like the average cost of a divorce is $12,900. So that's crazy.
A lot of money.
Yeah, it's a
right?
lot of money. So Dr.
Yeah.
X, welcome to Docs Outside the Box. How you doing?
Thank you. I am well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm happy you're here, and I'm definitely, first of all, let's just give you props for just having the courage to come on here and talk about something that probably nobody wants to talk about, right? Like divorce, right? That it's painful.
It's not
right?
fun.
It's
right?
not fun. But you're here to do what I think is really awesome, which is go through something that's really painful, something that's bitter, but then turn around and teach other people about it. So mad props to you on that.
Thank you.
So
Thank you for having me.
let's jump into like who you are. I know we're not going to get into specifically identifying who you are, but let's jump into what you practice, what's your specialty, things of that nature.
Absolutely. So I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a little over 6 years out of training. I mostly see children and adolescents. So that's been the
Bless
bulk
your
of my
heart.
work. Thank you.
You got the patience of Job.
I love them though. They're great. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let's use regions. What region of the United States are you in right now?
So technically I am in the southeast of the country.
Okay, the southeast of the country.
Yep.
Okay, all right. And what else? Let's go into. You've been practicing for about 6 years. How long prior to this divorce were you married?
Oh my goodness. So we were married for, I'd have to go back and do the math. It was about 8 or 9 years, but we were together for much longer than that while I was still in training. So
okay, so this is
total,
med school.
it was like
This person was
11
with you.
years.
This person was with you since med school, maybe even
Yes,
before that.
correct. Second year of medical school is when we met.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. So what was that like having a partner? And from what I understand, this person is not in medical school or is not a medical professional.
No, he is not. It was very different, I think, going through residency and also through fellowship. It's not really any different than most other people's jobs where you're overworked and you're underpaid. But I think once you become like a board certified attending, that's, I think, where you start seeing some differences, I think, in terms of just like compensation and the responsibility of that compensation. So
what was it like in medical school being in a relationship? I'm assuming you weren't married then, but you probably were seriously dating.
it was hard. I mean, we didn't have a lot of free time. I mean, I think that's pretty much the standard story. But, he was very supportive of me going through medical school and also through my training. So I think it was just like any other young professional who's going through school or going through training.
And when you two met like while you were pre-med or while you were a resident, when did you guys really meet?
So it was about the first year of medical school, and we didn't start dating until my second year. And we met at a friend's house at a poker game that we would have every week.
Who won?
I'd like to say I won most of the time, but that's probably about like half true. So
okay, all right. So he understood that you were in a very one of the most I'd say rigorous of training programs, whatever it may be. Engineer, whatever, the doctor is one of the most rigorous. So well aware of that. You guys start dating. I'm sure during dating and medical school, that second year you're getting ready for boards and so forth. I'm sure there's a lot of time apart, right? Like he understands that.
absolutely. Yep, absolutely. He was very understanding and very supportive of it. So
and then when did things get serious?
gosh, I think we started talking about getting engaged and getting married probably third year.
Oh, wow.
Residency. Yeah, right
Oh,
before I
okay. All
started
right.
fellowship.
Okay.
So
So you get through med school. Now you're going through residency. Okay. Got you.
it was a
So,
while. Yeah.
all right. So then y'all get married. Any red flags at that point where you're like, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, if I could be honest, I think I could have been a little bit more forceful with the prenuptial agreement, but it did come up and quickly fell by the wayside. But at
Who
that
brought
time,
it up?
you're young.
Who
I
brought
did.
up?
Oh, of course I did. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you brought up the prenuptial agreement and he did not want to sign a prenuptial agreement?
I think when you're that age, like we were in like our mid to like late 20s, nobody wants to talk about that. And like looking back, that was probably not a red flag, but just a foolish decision, I think, for everybody. But it just seems so like unromantic. Like who wants to talk about a prenup like right before you're planning your wedding, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying. So these are things that you were kind of thinking in your mind, and then as you get closer and closer to the date, you're like, should I bring it up? Should I bring it up? I don't know. I don't know if he wants half my money. Okay. And then he says no, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, let's keep moving. But that was the only red flag. That's still not bad, though.
No, it's not bad. I mean, I think, like I said, when you're that young, you think about these things, but you don't take them seriously. And like, I wasn't making like attending level money. So it wasn't like there wasn't a disparity there in terms of like our income. So I just thought, okay, whatever, like just that's fine. I never had the intention of getting divorced when I
Right.
got married.
Yeah, you don't think
So,
about it, and it's like half of 50,000 is like, all right. I mean, you all right. You know, it's not like I got
Yeah.
what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. And I'm not making light of this, but it's just like we've all been there in some form or fashion. Like I remember having that conversation with Renee where I was like, yo, maybe we should get a prenup. And like she quickly deaded that conversation. And she was like, look, like we both came into this relationship broke. What do you mean you want to get a prenup? I'm like, I'm just saying, like I don't know where you be at night, And she was like, no, we're not getting it. And I was like, all right. So, but at that point we had a ton of student loan debt each. I was like, all right. So,
Right.
so you decide to move on. You guys get married, your third year of residency. Okay.
Yep.
Marital bliss. It's great, right? I'm assuming. Talk to us. What happens next?
Yeah, well, life, I think, really like it is a big change. I think when you come out of training or fellowship, especially if you're a subspecialist, like you've worked really hard and you do get rewarded for it, and suddenly the responsibility of what to do with the money was certainly not a burden, but kind of like my issue to consider. I felt like that was kind of my onus. And on top of that, I was working in a job to fulfill the requirements of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program,
Ooh.
which, yeah, there you go. So you throw in two kids into the mix and it's just a perfect storm.
You didn't say that before. Oh, this is complicated. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I should have.
Yeah. Okay. So hold on. When you say money issues, are you talking about student loans specifically, or are you talking saving? Like, get specific. Let's get down with this because you're Dr. X. You can say whatever you want to say. It's not going to come back on you.
I think it's everything. I think, and I don't know if it's like this for everybody, but I know lots of attending say like when they get that first attending paycheck, they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this? Before you realize that like you owe it to pretty much everybody. Like you have to pay your bills, you have to pay your student loans. You have to figure out like, where's that money going to go for retirement? Like, how are you going to invest it? What are you going to do? And, a tough environment at work, but being fearful of losing that job to miss out on the possibility of having your loans forgiven, like that's another burden. I think a lot of people do talk about it, but it is a real burden. And it does create some financial stress because you maybe want to walk away from that job, but you can't because you've got a couple years left, to make that debt go away. So I think that stress was a factor too.
That's one of the reasons why me and my wife decided not to do it. It was because we figured out a plan that we can pay it off quicker, but also at the same time, like at the first job, I was like, man, I don't like these people that much. Like 10 years? I don't know. Like for real, like we're just like, I don't know if I could stay here for 10 years and then what if the next hospital, most hospitals are nonprofit. But I was like, what if something happens, and we go to another place and it just, so we decided to do hours early, but I can imagine that stress of you wanting to move possibly or make some, whatever you want to do, but you don't want to miss that consecutive payment or that stability of being at this one place that, established is recognized by PSLF. I get it. All right. So 2 kids, married, animals, right? You got dog?
Yep. 2 dogs. Yep.
House?
Yep.
Beautiful house, I'm assuming.
I am in it right now. I think we
Okay.
did we did okay. Yeah.
Sorry for the folks on YouTube, you can't see it. And this is in the Southeast.
Yep.
So y'all are doing right, right? Like he's got a job also, I'm assuming.
Hmm. Yeah.
Two income household. Um, what's up? What happened?
I think some people just grow apart. Like it's so
Mm,
cliched, but I think like everybody is going to grow and change. But it's if you're not moving in the same direction, it's just the distance just gets greater and greater. And so I think there were some things that we really hadn't worked out and hadn't thought about, like what our roles were going to be within the families, responsibilities between like the kids and work and like who covers what. There were just some, I think, pretty big issues that maybe we weren't on the same page about. And it wasn't going to change anytime soon. I think we had our ideas about how we needed or wanted things to be. And it just wasn't panning out that way, I think, for either of us. So,
were there any, like old school thoughts that were coming up in your head that was kind of keeping you from making that decision? Like negative thoughts, like, oh, but I mean, obviously, like, I guess you were feeling it more than he was. Tell me like, was it more on you? You were like, yo, I got to be out, or was it mutual?
I think initially it started that way where it was more my idea and I sort of got the ball rolling. But I think at the end of the day, he was pretty much in agreement and on board with it. And, everybody deserves to be happy. So I think he at least recognized that, if things weren't going well or we weren't necessarily happy together, like we could still find a way to like make it work for the kids. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So you decide to move forward with at least the ball rolling with a divorce. But I know that when you talk to folks and you give advice, you often say that it's important to make an inventory of why you may be fearful or hesitant to go down that road. Obviously, I think there's some obvious reasons, but help us with that. Tell us your thought processes as you went through this, because 1K is no joke, and doing it in the pandemic, like what you was doing. So talk to us, sis. How'd you make this work?
Yeah, I was pretty methodical. And that's why I like this list, because I started thinking about what are all the times where I went back and I canceled, that consultation with the family law attorney. Like, what was I afraid of? What was I fearful of? Sometimes it was just, the number one message we get as physicians is that financial ruin is like very likely with divorce for physicians. And that's not a very reinforcing message, I think, for us to get. So the first one was, this is going to cost me an arm and a leg. It might as well be cheaper for me to just stay married.
It's cheaper to
And
keep
then I don't.
but if you're the opposite, cheaper to keep him, I guess.
There
That's what
you
they
go.
say.
I mean, when you look at the numbers, though, I mean, $13,000, like that's not very appealing. That's
Let's
like investment money right there,
let's go through this. So it says the average cost of a divorce is $12,900, right? The median cost of a divorce is 7.5. So for all you statisticians, I forget, and I already passed my board, so don't ask me the difference between median and average, right? So the median course is 7.5 thousand. An uncontested divorce, which means that there's no major contested issues, $4,000. If there is a dispute over child support, child custody, alimony, that raises the cost of a divorce significantly. What are we saying? Divorces that go to trial on two or more issues. I didn't even know that I just thought you went to trial for a divorce, but I didn't know there's trial on issues. But that on average is $23,300. And check this out, y'all. The average hourly rate of a divorce attorney is $270 an hour. That's more than I think most doctors get paid on the hour if you were to do everything and take their rate into an hourly rate. That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to work like 2 hours for every hour that you spend on them, basically, like after taxes and after paying your bills. So it's just like it's too much. But I think, having this experience of not having to go through all that really, I just wanted to share that with other people because that's what kept me, I think, initially from acting on this. Like when I first started having these thoughts, and I just didn't want to be financially ruined. I finally made it. I made it to like the attending status and things like looked pretty rosy. Why do I want to throw a wrench in it and throw $15,000 at something or more? Like, what am I really going to get out of that? So that was a huge deterrent. And it wasn't until I actually spoke with my attorney that it even occurred to me that I could do it any other way. So I really appreciate that he was at least open with me about that. But some people are just scared of what other people are going to think about them, people in their family, people that they work with. people are going to feel guilty if there's kids involved. These are all the thoughts that I had about like, everyone's going to judge me. Everyone's going to like blame me if something happens with the kids, that, oh, it's because they got divorced. Like all those thoughts were popping up. But at the end of the day, when I look back on like that list of things that held me back, none of those things were actually true. Like they didn't matter because you're the only one who can assign meaning to those things. And if you don't over exaggerate their importance, it becomes a non-issue. So like nobody told me off because of my divorce. Nobody blames my kids' behavior on the divorce or anything. They're very well behaved, by the way. But nobody thinks any less of me or of my practice or just me as a person because I got a divorce. Like all these things where we just worry about other people's opinion and other people's perception, that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you're not being the best version of yourself, if you're not happy.
Yeah, that's a mic drop right there. For real, for real. So how long did it take you to have the initial thoughts that this ain't gonna work to actually you pulling the trigger? Like, was there months, years?
Total probably years. I think more seriously, like months. I think the actual appointment, the consultation with the family law attorney was pretty much the eye opener that I needed. And it was not pleasant. It was probably the first person outside of like myself who had been like, you should probably do this. Like if you're just holding off for financial reasons or for any of these other reasons, you should probably just go ahead and do it. Cause it seems like, you're not very happy. And no one had ever said that to me. So
how long of a list did you have in terms of the reasons why you were hesitant, to consider pursuing this? How long of a list did you have?
I mean, if I had to write it all at once, probably like a half, 3/4 of a page, but they all center around being like scared or anxious or guilty. But again, those were all things on that list that like, I can't control other people. I can't control what they do or what they say or what they think. And so I can only control like how much importance I want to give to those things. And so it really shouldn't matter. People should want other people to be happy. So
I get it.
Sort of like took that approach, and it turns out that like people were pretty sympathetic and pretty supportive of the few people that I told. So
now you said that you consulted with a family attorney and that he was it open to like an alternative way of doing things? Talk to us about that. What do you mean by that? Because I'm assuming, just take us through that process. What do you mean by alternative?
Sure. Absolutely. So at the consultation, usually with a family lawyer, they go over, here are the state laws, like just educate yourself about them. And then he sat down and, explained, okay, these are the 4 areas that you're going to have to negotiate. And he didn't even really talk about like his retainer or anything like that. He was just going through the process and just going through the steps with me. And I remember at the end thinking like, I like this guy. He's very cool and like even keeled. I don't want to fork over all this money. Like, I appreciate his advice, but I still don't want to be pouring money into this. So I asked him at the end of the consultation, I said, this list that you gave me, if I can sit down with my ex and we can hash it all out, could that be something? Could we use that? And he said, I'd be surprised if you could do it. But if you think you can do it, that would be a way to do it. He wasn't discouraging. He was just like, felt like based on the situation, maybe we couldn't do that. But it turns out we did. And he was very open. I paid him his hourly rate to process everything. So we actually stuck with him, or I stuck with him. And then my ex sought out his own counsel, but he told us point by point, all the items, all the sub items that we needed to agree on to have a separation agreement that would later become our divorce agreement. And it worked out very seamlessly, but he was very open to it. He wasn't one of those lawyers that was like, no, you have to retain me first and then we'll think about it. No talking to the lawyers, no discouraging of a mediator. He was just very open to the idea that it was possible, though he didn't think very likely.
So I'm assuming the 4 areas are very generic area. What are the 4 areas that people need to be considering to reach an agreement with their significant other when it's time for divorce?
Yeah, it's really straightforward, but there are lots of, depending on your situations, lots of sub items to consider. But the first is custody, which is just basically like, are you going to split joint custody with the kids? And then there's the physical schedule. How are they going to split time between the 2 households? The third item is usually assets, and the fourth is debts, or vice versa. But those are just the four things that everybody needs to agree on in order
so
to sort of
custody,
process it. Mm-hmm.
assets, debts, and then what was the other
And
one?
then the physical placement of the children. Like, how
Physical
are they
placement.
physically going to split their time? Like, do they primarily live with one parent and have visitation with another? Do you split 50-50? The specific schedule that you keep, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then when he presented this to you, you're like, oh, well, maybe I can present this to my spouse and we can actually have a, I guess what's the word I want to say, like a meaningful adult conversation about this.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what occurred basically? And you were able to find agreement on everything?
Basically, I'm also like kind of stubborn. So when people tell me like, I don't think you can do this, I'm kind of like, I'm just going to try it. So
Do you say the
I
same way?
was,
I'm going to try.
yeah, I was terrified. I was terrified that because the divorce was mostly my idea, maybe my ex wasn't going to be like game for that. Maybe he was going to be like, no, whatever, just waste your money. Like, we're going to duke it out with the lawyers. But he didn't do any of that. And I'm eternally grateful that he was willing to sort of cooperate like this, and that it was like a process that we both partook in equally. And we didn't have to involve people who like don't know us and don't know our family to parse all these details out. So I just approached him one day and said exactly that. I said, I don't want to sink money on the lawyers. Like, we should be saving it for the kids. And he agreed. And so over the course of like a couple sit downs at the dining room table, a couple hours maybe tops, like we had to like table some items and come back to them, but we just went item by item on that list and tried to knock out everything that we could, and we got pretty much everything. So.
Wow. Okay, so you reach an agreement on some really big things. What's the next step after that?
So the next step is making sure that my lawyer recommended that we have a separation agreement, like a legal notarized separation agreement that determines like custody and everything prior to the divorce. So it holds everybody accountable. So we basically just had to go get that notarized. There was an hourly fee that my ex paid to have it like read on his behalf, basically, so he could have some representation too. And then it gets notarized, and then you basically just follow it and sit on it until it's time to submit it to the courts for an official divorce. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's basically the courts make a decision. Now, obviously, there had to be delay because this happened during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it did. So we should
no
have
cold
at
feet
least...
during that time because they make you wait. You're like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Especially if you have kids, you have to wait like at least a year. You have to be separated, at least in our state. But I don't think there was ever like a thought where I thought, oh, let's just go back. So I feel like I should be open.
You were done.
I was done, but I wasn't like, I don't know. I wanted to be just like empathetic to like my ex's situation, and the fact it wasn't totally his idea, but he did eventually become accepting of it. But he didn't immediately like move out. So he lived in a separate part of our house in a studio apartment, basically, that we
TV
have
shows made
here.
like that, actually.
I know. Yeah. They probably turn out like a lot funnier.
Right.
It just seemed too much during the pandemic to find like a safe place for like him to rent. So basically we lived separately in this house so that the kids wouldn't be affected for like 8 or 9 months into it. So we basically were still like in the same space during the pandemic. And so that made it easier for me to be like, no, this is okay. Like this is the right direction. This is the right move. And it wasn't terrible or awful, nothing like that. It just became very clear that I wanted my own space.
Understood.
My own time. So
like, yeah, you do you. So, yeah. Okay. So what happened during this time, during the separation period with finances, right? In terms of, are you still is there still like a joint account to pay for certain things like house, mortgage, or what about electricity, things for kids, or even in general, like your 401k or your investing? Talk to us about that. Like, what effect does this have on you bringing in that money as a psychiatrist?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I did back off of my own personal investing for like a period of time, but I don't know, maybe I felt bad, but basically I covered everything during that period of separation and even beyond that. So when he was living in the separate apartment downstairs, I didn't ask him to pay a dime. I asked for nothing. I said, I just want you to do whatever you need to be in a good financial position. You owe me nothing. So you can live here. You don't have to pay rent. You don't have to pay utilities. Just be there for your kids and be a good roommate, and we'll be good to go.
Listeners, what y'all think about this? Thoughts. This is good. This is good stuff. Like, we're not trying to just take fodder off of your stuff, but this is like interesting. Like, y'all like so amicable. Y'all like what's going on? Like, dang, this is crazy. So listeners, what do you think about what she's saying? Does this work for y'all? I mean, I'm not trying to hope divorce on y'all, but those who are considering this, would you do the same thing? Huh, interesting. So what did he say when he said that?
Nothing really. He just kind of took the opportunity to put himself in a better financial position, which that's what I wanted for him, because I want my kids to be comfortable, whether they're in my house or whether they're in his house. So I never really saw his income, even before the divorce, as like mine to have a say over. You know what I mean? Like, he invested, he did what he needed to, he saved for his retirement. I just said, you go ahead and do whatever you need to do. So this was no different. I just wanted him to feel like he was on a good footing when the time came for him to actually like move into his own place. So.
Okay. So there's another thing that you talk about too, which is making a list of the things that you want to get out of a divorce that money can't buy or replace. Talk to us about what you mean by that. Get as specific as possible.
Right. So what do you want to get out of it? Like, what do you want if you have kids? What do you want for your kids? What do you want that relationship like with your ex to be like? So my list was 3 items long. I wanted my kids to be okay. I wanted to co-parent civilly and pleasantly with my ex. And I wanted to make sure that my dogs were taken care of. So,
the dogs?
The dogs, yeah. So that
how they get on that priority list?
They're old. I've had them since really before I started dating my ex back in the day. So, so they're kind of like my babies before I had babies. But that's all like I wanted, because I thought about it and I thought, okay, you take away my house, you take away my car, like whatever. I'm still working. I'm going to get it back. Like, it doesn't matter. So I think because of this information we're presented with, that divorce equals financial ruin for physicians, it's very hard, because you've worked so hard for this stuff and you've worked so hard for that Tesla or your retirement account or like whatever it is. And the idea,
Dr. X, you know something I don't know? What you trying to say? You know something I don't know? Come on now. You're a psychiatrist. You reading into my psyche too much. Come on.
No, I've heard you talk about Teslas, but they do on all the shows. So
we still didn't get one yet, by the way, but go ahead.
There's still time. So I just feel like we get attached to our stuff. Like, we get attached to these things that, like, if someone came in and took all this away, I could get it back and better. Like, if I really worked hard and I was like frugal and conscientious about stuff, like, this stuff doesn't mean anything compared to my kids, or that I have a good co-parenting relationship with my ex. Like, nothing else matters. Because if you're a high income like earner, or particularly a physician, if you are really financially ruined by a divorce, something is wrong. Like, I just feel like there's no way that you can't get it back. And like, maybe you need to adjust your expectations for what you have. So like, I'm not attached to this stuff, like, or this house or the car or whatever it is, because I can get it all back in another way. So all
that's a very mature way of looking at it.
Well, thank you. It took me a little while to get there.
So, I got you. I get it. And I know that this conversation, we're summarizing everything, right? Like the true feelings, the anguish, or the the hesitation back and forth. You can't really, I mean, we can get into it, but we're not really, we're sanitizing it, obviously. So let's get into it a little bit though, right? Because I think the other reason that people may want to use an attorney to do all of these different things is like, you're thinking about it while you're at work, and it's just like this constant thought process of all of these things that you have to understand with the legal system and so forth. Like, did that take a toll on your work? Honestly, did that take a toll on, did you bring stuff home from work? Did you like find like changes in your personality with children? Were you short with them? Like, there's got to be a toll that this takes, the stress level, right? Like, doing it on your own too.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think I brought the work home. I think part of it was just the environment that I was working in to like fulfill this loan forgiveness. And I just felt like I had to keep doing it because I just wanted to get those loans forgiven. But it was so toxic and so unpleasant that I was just drained when I came home. And there's no like remedy for that. Like my kids were a break from that. You know what I mean? But it was hard to like think about, oh, I'm in this toxic work environment and I'm trying to think about like, am I going to have to give away half my stuff? Like it's not a fun experience every day. Like it was a little bit exhausting. But I definitely think, everybody's got their point. So I think I had just reached a point where I was like, something is going to change. Like I'm going to make some changes. Like what is within my control? And that's when I started thinking about like, okay, I'm close to the end of the loans. I can switch jobs as soon as I'm done. Or like this relationship is not working for us anymore. Like, why are we still doing this? Like, it was just a lot of questioning, but it was a lot of the time. So it was a lot of thinking.
So I'm really impressed by like, you never get I don't get a sense from you that you ever want to feel stuck in any type of situation. Like you feel like you can there's always a workaround, right? It's not, I can't, it's how can I get or remove myself from this situation or change this perspective, which I think, a lot of us need to encompass more, right? When you have particularly a big stress in your life, it's always me, woe is me, for good reason and for bad reason. But that's really impressive. I'm really, impressed by that like, it doesn't matter. You're going to get it done. So at the end of the day, after separation, from the time of separation to actually when the divorce was done, what are we talking now? An additional year or so, or?
So the separation till divorce was done, I would say like it was about 15 months. So it was a little over a year. So there was a little bit of a delay with the courts because everything was like video and like your lawyers would drop stuff off. Like it was a process that didn't take like the expected like typical 6 weeks, but it wasn't so delayed like by like more months or like a year after that. So it was pretty efficient and it ended up being super easy for the courts because everything was ironed out. It was no fault. The entire separation agreement just became the divorce agreement. All the judge had to do was basically like wave his hands over it or bless it or whatever it is that he had to do that day in court. He just made it happen. And then I got a letter from my lawyer saying like, that's it, you're divorced. And I was like, okay, all right, thanks for letting me know. So
and all for $1,000. $1,000. That's it. Damn.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's amazing. And turning, a really I guess bad situation into a positive situation. We talked positive, pros. Give us, you got any regrets from this? Talk to us.
Yes, I think I don't want this to be like the first one, so it's not in order of importance. But
come on,
like
Dr. X, give us the truth. Give us the real truth. Come on now. What you really pissed off about? Come on.
All right. So it's not so much like being pissed off. I think I wish I had gone to premarital counseling. I wish I had gone to see like a couples therapist with my ex, someone who was very well versed and like work by like the Gottmans or a similar group. I wish that I had hammered all this out on the front end, because I think it would have been clear like what was fixable and what wasn't fixable, maybe. And then the prenup is probably one of my regrets, not because at that point I had anything. I was in the same situation as you guys. I was just like a mountain of debt coming out of like medical school. Like, do you want to share my debt? I'm happy to share my debt. Like that has nothing to do with it. But I didn't have this responsibility, this burden of, these attending paychecks that were coming in. So I didn't think about it, but it would have been nice to have an outline of, this is what happens with like communal property. Like this is what the payout will be, like based on like whatever state we happen to be in. Like it just would have been nice to have it already hashed out, like where everybody considered it fair when we didn't even think we were going to use it. So I just
help me to understand this, Dr. X. Help me to because I hear what you're saying about having a prenup agreement, but it sounds like the entire divorce proceedings was very smooth. So specifically, be specific. What do you mean? Like, are you having to provide a certain level of support? Tell us what you mean by that, because that's what I'm trying to understand. Right. Yeah.
I think it did go very smoothly.
Come on, Dr. X, tell us.
I just would have rather it already been done already. Like,
got you.
I think we were in a very amicable, like reasonable situation like given the way the two of us sort of like approached it. But I would have just liked it if we just looked at each other and were like, yeah, it's not working. That agreement. Yeah, let's just use that. Like, that's okay. And like only involve the lawyers if we needed to amend something or we thought something was like egregious or like unfair. I just like things to be taken care of already. So I realized that like I should be, and I am very grateful that things went so smoothly. I just would have rather it had all been settled when we didn't even think we were going to use it.
I get it. So, now I get what you're saying. Okay, I got what you're saying. Okay. All right, I get it. Well, listen, so are you like, I'm sure with you sharing this, I'm sure there's a lot of people from both sides, men and women, who are just like now consulting you like crazy and be like, yo, help me figure this out. Is that what's going on right now? Or?
I mean, it comes up with some of my friends, and I've like had conversations with some people about it, because when they find out, they're just like, how did you do that? Like, that's just like crazy. And I'm like, well, somebody just needs to tell you that you can. Otherwise, you'll be like I was initially, where I just thought, we're going to duke it out in court. Everything's going to be in the public domain. Like, my patients are going to be able to read about it. People are going to judge me at work, like whatever it is. And none of that stuff happened, because my lawyer was open and said, here's this unlikely way that you can make it happen. But if you want to try it, go for it. So, and we did.
Now, do you think if your spouse wasn't as like amicable, do you think that you still would have taken the approach of, look, whatever it takes, let's get it done? Or do you think you would have seen yourself kind of duking it out outside of things like the kids and maybe the dogs or something like that? But like, for example, like communal property or like support, like, do you think you would have been like, nah, hell no, I'm fighting this, like we doing this? Or do you think you would have just been like how you are now, which is, look, whatever it takes to get done and it's equitable and the kids are good and, what do you think in retrospect?
I think because our situation was so amicable, like it might not translate to other people's situations. Right. Like there wasn't any like inciting event. There wasn't any abuse or infidelity or fraud or anything like that. So it was a very tough decision to like part ways that it wasn't working. But if he had not been agreeable to it, I don't know, I probably still would have like offered up everything that I agreed to. I would have just been like, okay, let's just pay the lawyers to talk then, and hopefully it won't amount to much. But I don't think I would have started getting sort of like grabby after like assets and things like that. Because at some point you're just like, I want it to be done. I want it to be done nicely and fairly. But I mean, sometimes, I probably would have been willing to throw some money at it just to finish it. But I don't know that the outcome would have been much different. I didn't cede anything that the courts would not have agreed with or would have like required of me. I basically just found out like what's the basic for spousal support. I didn't ask for any child support. He didn't ask for any of me. We split property in the house, everything. So I can't imagine him also getting like a little grabby in terms of like the stuff in the house and everything, but
I want that
it could have gone that way.
Recliner. Yeah. I see people. Yeah. All right. I get it. Okay. And you know what? My actual final question is let's say, and you will, right? When you find love again, and let's say you head down that path again, and you decide that you want to get married, are you going to get a prenup this time?
If I even get married again.
Ooh, okay.
1,000%, I would get a prenup. Absolutely. So
okay, so listen, this was good. Listen, listeners, this is where it's at. So there are obviously multiple options that you can take in life, and I think that if it's possible where you and your spouse can have an amicable separation, sometimes it's better, just like you said, Dr. X, to move on. And still not have the financial ruin that people oftentimes purport will happen to you as a physician. And I actually was doing more research. I found that out of all healthcare workers, doctors actually have the lowest divorce rates, actually. So I know everybody's, it's just in line with what's going on. Actually, it's not. These things just happen. But if you can prevent them, or if you can do it in a way that's amicable, and ultimately the key thing is for you to be happy, which it sounds like you are right now, that's all that matters. So listen, Dr. X, any parting words you want to leave the listeners with on this topic?
I think just letting people know, like, don't let people tell you that you can't do things, and you should at least try if it's the right thing to do. And you might be pleasantly surprised with how it turns out. So,
boom. There it is. Dr. X, thank you so much for sharing this really very sensitive subject. on marriage as well as divorce, but also at the same time taking and turning this around into something positive that the listeners can learn from. And, I think a lot of times we do things out of convenience, and unfortunately, sometimes staying in maybe a toxic marriage or just a marriage that just is not working is one of them. So I appreciate you, teaching us about this, and I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you crush it in a career, and I hope you find love again. So
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Dr. Nee. I appreciate it.